Today we're going to be talking about two of my favorite topics, books and Stardew Valley. Hi, my name is Sarah Freshly and welcome back to Freshly Read Books. So I thought it would be fun to kind of hyper-analyze the characters from Stardew Valley and recommend books for you to read based off of who's your favorite. Or maybe this is just recommendations to those characters themselves, like if I could talk to them and give them book recommendations, this is what I'd give to them. Because I don't know if they all read, but they should. So if you don't know about Stardew Valley, it is one of my favorite games of all time. I play it yearly. Like once it gets to like October-ish, that's when I start playing well, maybe September. Just because it's a super cozy game. It does take place during all 4 seasons. You maintain a farm, you build relationships with people in the town, you can go mining, you can do like a bunch of different things. It's a lot of fun. I've played the base game several times. I've played it with like the #1 mod that's like associated with it, and this year I'm playing it with like a bunch of mods and it's so much fun. But today we're just talking about base characters and we are narrowing it down to the characters that are marriageable. In Stardew Valley there are a ton of people that live like in the town, Pelican Town, is that the name of it? But there are 12 people that you can marry, and you can marry any one of those 12 people. So we kind of learned the most about those characters, and so I base this off of those conversations with them, as well as some reading that I did online, because I think I've only gotten married like once in the game, because it's just the maintenance of my farm is really like the one thing that I'm into. Also, I don't love the base character options. Like I like them as people, but like, you know, do I want to spend the rest of my fictional life with them? Not really. The sun just went behind a cloud and it got dark, so I'm gonna turn the light on. So yeah, we're gonna focus on those 12 people. And this is in no particular order. So let's start with Abigail. Now, Abigail it's funny, as I was thinking back, I was thinking of her as being like kind of goth. I guess I was kind of thinking of her as being a lot like Sebastian, who we'll talk about next, which makes sense, like they're friends. But as I was reading more online about her character, it was making me realize that like that's not quite who she is. She's a lot more outdoorsy than I think I initially was thinking of her as, but like with a dark edge to her. So the first book that I put down for Abigail was The Plotters by Unsoo Kim, and I don't remember the translator off the top of my head and I don't have the book with me, but this is the translator, because it's a more adventurous book, but there is a darkness to it. The Plotters are essentially like this group of people that plan out these executions, these murders, and then there are the people that actually do them. So you're following a character that gets instructions from plotters and then has to like kill somebody. And that's his job throughout it. But I feel like that there is quite a bit of adventure in this, but also there's obviously a darkness to it. Along with that sense of adventure, I went with the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey. It starts with Leviathan Wakes and it's more sci-fi, and I think I could see Abigail like getting into the sci-fi genre, but I think it's more the adventure element that would like really pull her in. Also, there is like a bit of, not really fantasy, it is a little bit fantasy feeling because of how world building it is, and her, Sebastian, and Sam all play D&D. That's like one of the cutscenes that you can get. So I think that she would be into like the great big world and universe, whatever, of The Expanse. And then I was also kind of thinking that she might be attracted to books that are kind of about like female empowerment or just like women being awesome. So I also went with Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, which is about a woman circumnavigating the globe or like working towards that, but it's also her life before that. So it's got a bit of that adventure in there. It's got a woman doing something awesome. Next up, let's talk about Sebastian, who is Abigail's very good friend. As I said, he's like a part of the group that plays D&D, and I think that he would be the one that's most into fantasy. I believe he's the DM in that session, as in he's the one that's running the game if you're not familiar with Dungeons & Dragons. Also, it might not technically say that it's D&D in it. It might just say that it's like a role-playing game. But yeah, I think he's the DM or Dungeon Master in it, which leads me to believe that he would be the most interested in fantasy. So for him, I was saying that he would probably be like a huge Brandon Sanderson nut. Like, I think he would be so into Brandon Sanderson. I think he would have like in order that he thinks you should read all of the books in, like just at the top of his head, ready for anybody to ask. I also think he'd be really into The Lord of the Rings, since that is so influential to the fantasy in general, but especially to role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. I also said Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames, because because I will never pass up an opportunity to talk about that book. It is so good. It's so funny. It's about a band of mercenaries who have been out of the game for a long time. They're older at this point, they're retired, but then they like get back together for one last adventure. It's so much fun all the way through, and it does kind of feel like you're reading a D&D campaign. And with that, let's switch over to Sebastian's sister, stepsister technically. So for Maru, she's really into science. She's got her own little like laboratory area off of her house, off of her parents' house, and a bit like into inventions and things like that. She does also, I think, work part-time at the doctor's office as a nurse, but I really focused on her passion, which is science. So the first book I went with for her was In Ascension, because it's really science heavy, but also the main character I feel like is more into science than she really is into like family. I mean, she still tries, like it's not like she doesn't like her family or she's not in touch with her family. She is, but her passion for science and exploration is so huge a part of her life and so much bigger a part of her life. But I think that Maru, to me, that's kind of what she feels like, as it's somebody whose like passion comes first and then second is like her relationships with other people, which makes her sound bad, and she's not. She's super nice. But I think that that's totally valid and also kind of incredible to like know something that you're that passionate about. So I think that she would really like this one because there's a lot of like exploration that goes into it, and I think that she would have the patience that I think that this book requires to really love it. And then I also said that she would be into Blake Crouch, specifically his books Dark Matter and Recursion, mostly because those are the only two that I've read by him. So I can't really speak to his other books, but those are very heavy sci-fi and really like the themes in them, they take a lot of brain power to keep up with as the story goes on, because it kind of starts small and then it like snowballs and snowballs, which is a lot of fun. I think that those books are just fun in general, but I think that she would really appreciate how far they go. And then lastly, I said Jules Verne just in general for her, because those books are so influential in like the sci-fi space, specifically more like sci-fi adventure, I guess. But I think that she would appreciate them for what they are and what they helped do for the genre. I think that her favorite would probably be 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, just because I think that that one goes the heaviest with the science. Even though of the three that I read, the other two being Around the World in 80 Days and Journey to the Center of the Earth, that one was probably my least favorite. It was tough to get through. Sorry if there are kitchen noises. Curtis is doing dishes and the kitchen's right there. Okay, so from here, let's move on to Harvey. Since Harvey is Maru's friend and coworker, maybe boss, I don't really know how that works. Because yeah, he owns the doctor's office and she works there as a nurse. So I guess, yes, he is her boss. So Harvey's a little bit nerdy. He like firmly does not like adventure. He's super afraid of heights, but he's very smart because he's a doctor, so we can only assume that he's very smart. And I think that he would be really into reading a lot of nonfiction books that I've never heard of. But also, I think that he would read Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, which is a wonderful nonfiction book that goes through just like the history of humans in general, not just like physically, although it does go into that, but also like agriculture, how money has evolved, like currency has evolved, religion, the like justice, different types of justice systems that have existed. It's a super interesting read. I recommend this to anybody. I absolutely love this book. And it's just like so fascinating to just like, even if you just read a tiny little bit of it at a time, it's so good. And also I tried to think of like novels he would like, just because that's what I know more about. So I think that Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro he would really like. This is another one of my favorite books of all time. It's about a butler and his experience like working for somebody, but mostly like he takes this little vacation and he's off driving by himself and he's thinking back on his career and what it means to have your whole life being dedicated to serving someone else. It's a very slow book, but so there's something about being in that book and reading it that is just so wonderful, and I think Harvey would really appreciate that. And then I also said Trust by Hernan Diaz, which I think is a little bit of a stretch, but I do think that he would like the peeling back the layers feel of it, because that book is split into 4 parts and each part is about the same story. It's about like this couple, but it's from a different perspective. And so you learn more and more about them and this time period with each section you go through. And I think that he would like that. I don't know why. It's just a feeling that I get. I've been trying to get a connection between characters to go to the next character, but I can't think of who Harvey would have a connection to, outside of Maru, of course, which is what led me to him. So I'm just gonna go from the doctor to the person that I think is the most physically fit, and that is Alex. He is our jock. He seems a little bit like a meathead, especially in the beginning, but as you learn more about him, you learn that, you know, maybe there's a little bit more there. He lives and like helps take care of his two grandparents, which are two of my favorite characters. They are in a Grumpy Sunshine relationship. Anyways, I think that Alex would really like what I talk about when I talk about Running by Haruki Murakami, because it is a book that at its core is about running, but also it is a lot about writing, which I don't think particularly Alex would be into, but I do think that he would be into a bit of like the introspectiveness of it, especially because I feel like that book doesn't get too deep, but it does. I feel like for him it would be a great way to like kind of get under the surface a little bit. Like a book that kind of presents itself to be about running, but also digging into a little bit deeper than that. I also think he'd be really into Jurassic Park. Specifically, I think he will have watched the movie, loved it, and then he'll want to watch the book, and then he will, and then he would just like love this and talk to everybody about it all the time, which I agree with. It's also one of my favorite books. So I'm not trying to say anything bad about him, but it is kind of a more bro book to have as a favorite book. And I say that fully knowing that it's on this mug for me, like it's right there. So, and then the last book that I chose for him was The Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac, which is technically the follow-up to On the Road, but I haven't read On the Road, so I'm going with The Dharma Bums just because I think this would be one step further into the introspection, but also it is kind of critical about a lot of like the daily practices of people, and I think that Alex does show signs of that, of kind of questioning like why it is that we do the things that we do, or the like stick to these like specific routines. I don't think he really does much to break out of it, but I think he would fantasize about breaking out of it. And the Dharma Bums would allow him or facilitate that fantasy. And then let's talk about Alex's friend, Haley. So Alex and Haley in general are very much like the jock and like cheerleader stereotypes, with a little bit more going on past that. So Haley, in the same way that Alex comes off as like just being a jock and kind of a meathead at first, she comes off as being somebody that's like really obsessed with how she looks. Not my favorite person when you start the game. There is more there, but she is looking for somebody to like help her open jars of peanut butter and stuff. I'm pretty sure that that's actually a cutscene where you help her open a jar. So I think that she would be really into romance books. I was thinking like Taylor Jenkins Reid, her early stuff, with the exception of After I Do. Is that the name of it? If that's not the one I'm thinking of, I'm gonna put the one I'm actually thinking of here. So not that one, but Taylor Jenkins Reid, her other early stuff. I think that she would like those books just because they are romance, but there's also like a little bit more to them, that like more on the character or like personal side. I also put down When in Rome for her because I think that that's the type of story that she would really like. That's about a woman who is a celebrity in some capacity, I think a singer, and then she goes to Rome, Kentucky because it was the nearest Rome she could find, and she was watching Roman Holiday and ends up like staying there for a while and like hiding out from her responsibilities and all that she has like wound up in because she's a part of this industry. She meets a guy there who owns like a bakery or something. I don't know. But I think that that relationship in general is one that Haley would really like, and I think she would kind of see herself in the main character. I also think that she could get into like a little bit of true crime podcast. Like I think that she would listen to that kind of stuff. So I also gave her, and this isn't true crime, but just I think that she would be a little bit open to those like darker themes. So I also put in My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This is one of my favorite thrillers, and also there is like a bit of a relationship. And I also said that I think that she would really like Sarah J. Maas, but I think she would be intimidated by the fantasy of it all to actually read her books. Like I think that she could get there, and maybe if she like spent more time with the people in the town that I think would be really into fantasy, like maybe she would get there, but she'd be like a little bit too nervous to try it on her own, but she would love it if she did. Okay, so from Haley, let's jump to Emily, who is Haley's sister. Emily is very creative, a little weird. She's a bartender at the saloon. She also like makes clothes and has like a little sewing machine. She like nurses this bird back to health at some point. She's very caring, but she's a little bit of an oddball, which I really like, that her and Haley are sisters. They live together alone, and I just think that their relationship's kind of cute because it's like a little bit strange because they are very different from each other, but you can tell that there is still like this closeness there. Emily, on the other hand, I do think that she'd be really into like some romance fantasy books. I do think that she would read Sarah J. Maas. Maybe Haley would, you know, steal a few of those from time to time, sneak them, read them. But yeah, I think that Emily would be really into that. I also think that she would just be like into romance in general. So I put Emily Henry because I hear she's great. I haven't read any of her books yet. I do have Beach Read, so I will read one of her books soon. I've also heard really good things about Book Lovers, so we'll get there. But I don't, maybe it's just because her name was Emily that I was like, yeah, she'll like Emily Henry. I also put Death Valley by Melissa Broder because there is this cut scene where you get to see like Emily's dream, and it reminds me a lot of some scenes from Death Valley. So I put that one. That might be a stretch, but I think she would like that, like really loose. Like I could even see her enjoying, what's that book I hate? My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I could even see her enjoying that, like the just looseness of the story. I also put Love and Other Thought Experiments by Sophie Ward, I want to say. But that one's like short stories and they're a little bit weird, but they also draw on like philosophical ideas. So I kind of think that she would be into that. I don't know. I feel like Emily's reading taste would be all over the place. So my recommendations for her are all over the place. And then let's go to Haley and Emily's neighbor, Sam. Who lives with his family just next door. So he is good friends with Abigail and Sebastian. He lives with his mom and his younger brother, and then also his dad, who at the start of Stardew Valley is off on like active duty. So you don't get to meet him for quite a while, but you do know that that's something that kind of impacts Sam. So I think Sam would just be into like the most fast-paced books. So I put like Ready Player One. I feel like that would be something that he would like get really into. And then I feel like he would go to see the movie and then like the first time through he would be like, man, that wasn't enough like the book at all. And then the second time through he'd be like, actually they did a pretty good job. And I might be saying that just because that was my experience. Who can say? I also think that he'd really like The Martian by Andy Weir. And then for one that's like got a little bit more to it than just like the fast-paced nature of it all, I went with The Curious Incident of the Dog at Nighttime, or sorry, Dog in the Nighttime. And I don't remember the author and I forgot to write it down, so it'll be here. That one, I feel like it does move kind of quickly, but also it's a lot about the boy in it kind of experiencing the world and like going out and doing stuff on his own more. And I think that Sam, that's something that he kind of needs. Like I feel like his mother definitely helps him a lot and like does a lot for him. And so I don't think he's super self-sufficient. I also think his friends kind of do a lot for him. That's the impression that I get. That's the impression that I get. Oh, that song's gonna be stuck in my head, which is kind of perfect because he skateboards. And I know that song so well from the Tony Hawk game. I never had to knock on wood, but I know someone who has. It makes me wonder if I could. But I just think that that book would kind of help him to like want to do more for himself. I don't know. And I feel like he would really love the main character, especially as somebody who is an older brother, since the main character is like younger than him. I think that there would be just something there that would really work well. That one doesn't really go with my theme for what I thought he would like in books, but for some, it's one of those like gut feelings. Okay, and then Sam takes us to Penny, who I think is who he likes. Penny is a, not really a school teacher. Like she teaches the kids, but it's more like she like watches them. I don't know how much of a like actual teacher she is, but she's super sweet. I think that she would actually be like a huge book nerd and read a ton. She takes the kids to the library like every day, like the young ones in the town. And there's not much to her, but she's just really nice and she likes kids. So I put that I think that she would like The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I think that she would really connect to the main character in that. That's about a girl. She's very young when she is sent to marry this man, but it's so much about her like internal thoughts and her kind of understanding like where her life is going, what it has been so far, what her family was really like, you know, just coming to terms with like her reality. I think Penny might get a bit of that. She lives with, I think she's her aunt. I can't remember her name now, but she's the one that drives the bus, and also she's an alcoholic. But they live in like a trailer in the town. Pam, that's it. But they live together in this trailer. And so I think that that indicates that Penny may have had like a more turbulent upbringing. And so I think that she would kind of connect with somebody else who had that and is also kind of coming to terms with that. I guess the character in The Marriage Portrait didn't really have like a turbulent family history, but her family just didn't really care about her all that much. And I think that that's something that she didn't like fully understand until she was like leaving that situation. I also gave her Elsewhere. I think that she would be into literary fiction in general. Elsewhere by Alexis Shakin is one of my favorite literary fiction books. It's about this woman that is in this village, and when women have children, then there's like a chance that they might just like disappear and nobody knows why. And kind of throughout it, there's like this realization of like what's going on more. And it's like a slow realization, kind of like the first one. I don't know why, I just feel like Penny would really like books with slow realizations. I also gave her Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe. I don't remember why. I like honestly do not remember why. I think that she would also like nonfiction. I don't think that she would just be into novels. I think she would be like just a voracious reader, and Say Nothing is a really good nonfiction book, so I think that that's why I picked it. And then I also gave her Cloud Cuckoo Land just because I thought that she'd be so into books, and Cloud Cuckoo Land is a great book for people that love books and also literary fiction. So I thought that she'd be really into that. And like this idea of keeping this story alive, I think that that would be totally up her alley. Okay, and so since we're talking about Penny, whose aunt I think is Pam, and Pam is an alcoholic, we can go to the marriageable person who is also an alcoholic. This is quite the tie. Shane. Shane is the epitome of, I can fix him.
Maybe I could fix him.
Because he has a drinking problem. Like, let's be real. He is not in a good way when you get to Pelican Town to begin with. And he has a hard time like asking for help. And that's something that he like works on. He lives with Marnie, his aunt, and his niece Jazz, who is adorable but very shy at first. And he also really likes taking care of animals. Oh, and he works at Joja Mart, which is the epitome of capitalism in a building. In Stardew Valley, you can choose to either go like the Joja Mart route or the community center route. The community center is obviously building up the community. The Joja route version I have never played because I just can't. So Shane, I think that would actually be into some like heavy hitters if he were to get into reading. But I think that he would really like The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida. There's a lot to it about like the main character is like hiding a lot in his life, and he dies at the beginning of the book, and then you get to see him in the afterlife, or like this kind of in-between space before he's like truly at the afterlife, but where he can kind of look back on his own life or see people as they are currently past his death. And I think that that's something that Shane would like to see for reasons that I think are a little bit too game spoilery, but I think he kind of needs that moment. He needs like a Christmas Carol moment. You know what I mean? Like a Ghost of Christmas Future moment. And I think Seven Moons of Mali Almeida is like a good version of that. I don't know. I also think that he'd like Brief Interviews with Hideous Men. This is a collection of short stories by David Foster Wallace. It gets super meta, but also there are just some really good like thoughts in this that I think that he would really gravitate towards if he gave it the time. And in a similar way, I think Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which is another very reflective book that is a collection of short stories that all take place at this cafe where you get to time travel basically, but you have to come back before your coffee gets cold. And I just think the books where he's like really looking back and reflecting, or like where the characters in it are really looking back and reflecting, are something that would just help him a lot. And then let's go with the other person that lives in like that area of Stardew Valley near Marnie's place, which would be Leah. So Leah is like the town artist. She's really into sculpture. She lives in like a really small little cabin that is very cute. She's one of my favorite characters. And so I picked for her one of my favorite books of this year, which is The Other Half. This is like a mystery that is set in London, I think, where there's this crime, this murder that happens to somebody who's in this group of very like wealthy people. And so there's a lot of conversation in it, just besides the fact that it is a mystery, and that's very fun. There's also a lot of conversation in it about like class disparity. And I feel like Leah would like that. Also, there's conversations about art, which mixes in with that. So I think that she would be into that kind of a story. I also think that she would just be into like outdoorsy introspective books. So I gave her Peter Heller, specifically the two that I've read, which are The Guide and The Last Ranger, which there's also like kind of a mystery element to them, but they are very nature feeling and they are very introspective. And then lastly, I gave her Wild by Cheryl Strayed, because I think that she would be, out of everybody, the one that like most likely to hike the Appalachian Trail or something. Maybe Abigail. I actually kind of struggled between the two of them as to who to give this book to, but I think it fits with Leah more. I know I was trying not to double up on books. I don't know why I was like making rules for myself, but if you haven't read it, that's a book about Cheryl Strayed, who hiked, not the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Coast Trail. So she hiked that entire length, but it's very introspective as well, because most hiking books are. It's a lot about what you're thinking about while you're hiking. And I think that Leah would really appreciate that in a story. And then we'll jump to Leah's friend, Elliott, who is, he looks like Fabio from like some romance novel. And I think he's very much meant to be that option as far as a marriage candidate goes. He lives in a cabin on the beach. He's a writer. So I gave him my like top writer focused book, and also one of about 2 that I've read, which is Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. I've talked about this one so much, so I don't want to get too far into it again. It gives advice on writing, but also on life. And then besides this one, I gave him more books that I thought would be good like character studies and very character driven, as well as very atmospheric. So I gave him A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles, one of my other favorites. This is about a man who is on house arrest, but he's serving it in a hotel. And he's kind of a more isolated man, but he gets to know the people that stay in the hotel because he needs like that human connection, and it's almost like forced upon him because of the setting that he's in. I also gave him Murder on the Orient Express just because I think that that's a great book for a bunch of characters interacting with each other. I think that that would really help him to become like a better writer. So many characters with like very distinct personalities all interacting. And then lastly, I gave him The Secret History by Donna Tartt, because this is another one that I think is just fantastic with characters and atmosphere, really. It's about a group of students in this US Northeastern school, and the main character is from California. Then he ends up going to the school and winds up within this group of people, and then kind of becomes like a different type of person than he ever saw himself being, I think is the best way to say it. But the characters themselves are so distinct from like the moment you meet them, and it's so wonderful. So yeah, another book of like just really great characters. Oh, did we get everybody? Oh my gosh, she was the last one. We did it. Okay, that is all of the marriageable people in Stardew Valley and what books I think that they would be reading, or that I think you should read if they're your favorite character, if you feel like you really connect to them. Let me know if you agree, if there are certain characters that you would have like kind of classified their reading tastes differently, and if you would like to see more of the people from Stardew Valley or from a different game or thing for book recommendations. This was kind of fun to put together, and I think that I'm finally like getting to the point where I read enough books to be able to do this type of video. I found it very hard initially just because I was really stuck to like certain genres, and now that I'm branching out more and more, it's easier to do this type of a thing. So yeah, I hope that you liked it. If you did, consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!